Imagine being in love with a sport for decades that it continues to keep the spark in you alive and make your work legendary. With an intention to train young kids and make them Grand Slam champions, Rick Macci is a relentless force in the world of tennis. Be it Venus Williams, Serena Williams, Maria Sharapova, or Andy Roddick, they all had their tennis foundations laid at the Rick Macci Academy. Not just these four. There are scores of tennis stars over the years who have used his tennis brain and managed to improve a thing or two in their games, thanks to his advice. With years of playing as well as training experience to his name, Macci's conventional and old-school approach continues to reap benefits to scores of tennis aspirants across the United States. Join us as we sit with Rick Macci to hear his thoughts on Coco Gauff, Serena Williams, friendship with Richard Williams, and much more.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the ES Fancast. My name is Kenny Ducey, and today we have a very special guest. Not only do we bring you guys the most in-depth chats with the people closest to your favorite sports, our brand new platform also gives you the full experience with live interactive polls, on-the-go reels, and infographics that give you the essential story. And this man right here, the world of tennis would not have been the same without him. If he picked a different career path, who knows what would have happened in this great game. He decided to help young players hone their craft, and the game is better for it. He's used his passion and his expertise with some of the most incredible tennis talents. He's coached 5 youngsters who went on to go become world number 1, most famously the coach of the Williams sisters, one of the greatest tennis coaches of all time, a best-selling author, and he is still celebrating his birthday, I hope. Rick Macci, welcome to the ES Fancast.
No, I'm glad to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun. I just jumped off the court, so I'm fired up and ready to go.
Well, that's good news because us tennis fans are clamoring for any sort of tennis content right now. It is obviously the 1 month off season, and Rick is going to help us here fill the void in the meantime. So I want to start off talking about the big movie, King Richard, the Oscar-winning film. We got to know your true friendship with Richard Williams. Do you guys still keep in touch? Have you hit the court? Tell us more about how that's been going since the film.
Well, First of all, I love this question. I'm glad you started off with this because I love Richard Williams. Now, you might not be able to pick up on that in the movie, and I tell people I should be in the Hall of Fame just putting up with that guy for a while. But no, listen, he was my best friend. Serena and Venus were like my own daughters. We still stay in touch. He lives 30 miles away in West Palm Beach. He was actually just at the Academy this past Thanksgiving. You know, we played the song. He came down the sidewalk. We were arm in arm. I had about 50 kids there during Thanksgiving. He gave a speech. You know, he's 82 now. He doesn't leave the home that much. But the fact that he came and wanted to make a difference in kids' life. And I never seen a guy sign so many body parts, T-shirts, tennis balls, and take pictures in Richard Williams. He's always been about giving back and helping others. But to answer your question, we stay in touch all the time. We talk, we text. He's my best friend, simply because of one reason: an amazing father. Because there was chaos when that whole thing was going on with the publicity and all that. I just love him as a father, the way he treated those girls, no matter what the situation was.
Well, yeah, I know we have no time to waste here. We got a lot to talk about, but that's obviously what's on everyone's mind, But so you guys have been staying in touch all the way through, or was there maybe a moment recently where you guys got back in touch? And I don't know. I mean, it seems like a pretty special bond. We obviously saw on Instagram he was as you said, at the Academy. So it seems like things are good between you guys.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and I did something for his documentary. And obviously the memories, when we go back down memory lane, the stories I have, and what's crazy is Richard, even though he's had some health problems, he remembers everything, all the stories that really weren't in the movie. But we were best friends. You got to understand, it was kind of like me and him against the world back then, because I would tell everybody, Venus is going to be number 1. Maybe her little sister might be even better. They're going to be better than Capriati. And they haven't done anything. It's like I made them legendary before they were even legendary. And I took a big risk, as you saw in the movie. I could have been wrong, even though I knew I wasn't going to be. I just knew that we had to work and they needed opportunity. But, Yeah, we stay in touch. Great guy. But for a long time, we didn't have a lot of contact when the girls were on the tour, you know, when he was coaching them. So really more towards the movie, we started getting more back in touch. And then when the movie came out, bang, it's just like we never disconnected whatsoever. But the best father ever. And I need to say this, people don't understand this. And I wish it would have been in the movie. And by the way, the movie was spot on. Bernthal, he had this big bushy mustache. Mine was more like yours. It was like this little piece of astroturf. So other than that, the movie was spot on. But Richard, every single day, the girls brought their books to the court. And if it rained, go to Rick's office and study. Then every single night, good, bad, happy, sad, mad, the girls said, Rick, thank you very much. And believe me, with Serena, she was like a little pit bull. It wasn't all rainbow, lollipop, and sunshine with her. So, but that's gratitude. And he always wanted the kids to smile and be happy because he knew that him and his wife hit the genetic jackpot. These were two special athletes that just needed an opportunity. And we created an environment that they were almost like brainwashed to be number one.
I can't believe I'm catching strays after one question on the ES Fancast with Rick Macci. My goodness. I mean, I got good coverage on my beard. I don't know what else I can say about it. Is it but you said he was spot on, but is it like weird watching someone play you on a movie screen, especially a movie you know everyone's going to be watching? Like is it like do you have a Cosmo Kramer moment where you're like, oh no, I'll play him. Like I'll play myself. No one can play me.
Well, I wish they would ask me. I think I could have played myself even better, but John did a great job. You know, we talked a lot before the movie. He read the book, he read all the Macci-isms, the quotes, and they watched. Richard had so much video. It was amazing. And you saw that in the credits at the end of the movie, all that video. So Bernthal did a great job. I didn't know I was that like wired up and plugged in all the time, but my daughter said, yeah, Dad, you're kind of like that. But I think he captured the moment. But listen, the walk, the talk, the nuances, everything. And I knew right away Will Smith was going to win an Oscar. I did. He was better than Richard. He was better than Richard. I couldn't believe the attention to detail. And I told Will Smith this at the after party. It was mind-boggling because Isha, the older daughter, she was there all the time. So she had a little better grasp on it, where Venus and Serena, you know, they were still, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They didn't probably have as good a grasp. The way Isha brought this to life was mind-boggling. And the whole movie was almost 100% spot on.
You know, Rick, as much as I'm offended by what you said about my mustache, I think if I were Will Smith after that Oscars, you would be the person I would want to talk to for advice and coaching. I'd feel like you would have comforted me so much in that moment. But yeah, what a wild night for him, huh?
Yeah, well, that's a whole different thing. But now that you brought that up, you know, a year later was the Oscars, and my take on it's very different. And you've seen Hollywood actors play a part, you know, and even the guy that played the Joker. You know, there's all these people, you become that character. And the one thing about Richard, he was such a staunch defender of his family. Now, this all happened during the pandemic. And so Will would go home and even talk to his kids like Richard. He would still be in costume at home. So this was a drawn out process. And I really believe during that moment when he walked up on stage and kind of greeted Chris Rock, he thought he was Richard. I mean, and you got to remember when that guy in the movie picked on Venus and he blew a gasket, that was in my office back in the day, and he freaked out on that reporter, you know, she's a little kid and leave her alone. I just almost felt like Will was Richard in that moment. I know people can't grab it. I think some people could, because who would do something like that on the biggest night of your life, on the biggest stage? You know what I'm saying? So I don't think he was thinking. I think he was Richard, and he just reacted.
I think you're absolutely right about that. That's incredible insight. But you're right. I mean, that's, you know, he's such an amazing actor. Obviously, he's one of the best actors of this generation. And when you have those skills, I mean, that's where you are mentally. It's sometimes hard to separate the character from reality. So I think that's think that's probably pretty true. And by the way, to those of you watching this right now, you can take place in the interactive polls in the feed. Let us know your thoughts on Rick's wonderful hoodie, or maybe he should have chosen the highlighter color today. My ugly mustache, Will Smith, whatever you want to do. Let's move on to some tennis players here specifically. I want to talk about Coco Gauff, because there was a report that not too long ago, maybe before the US Open, that you guys had talked about maybe a partnership. And then obviously she worked with Brad Gilbert during the US Open, and then she won. How close did that ever get to materializing? And are you still like in the game right now? Are you looking to coach someone else maybe? What's going on with you?
Well, I have enough on my plate. And remember, I'm not a travel coach. I'd rather build the box than sit in the box. You know, I'm not that type of guy. But I would have worked with someone from start to finish, and they got to the finals of Grand Slam, I'd obviously go. But no, a while back, you know, Coco's dad, very good friends, her little brother, who's an incredible athlete. You think Coco's an athlete? This guy's the #1 quarterback for a 10-year-old in the United States. The guy has a gun. He does backflips. The little brother's amazing, and he plays all kinds of sports. So good friends with the dad. But they reached out to me because obviously the forehand has always been a little speed bump. And they came, Corey and the hitting partner, I kind of showed him some things. But I said, listen, this needs reconstructive surgery. You got to take time off. You know, we got to rewire the reflexes, reprogram the muscle memory. I might have to reverse engineer the whole thing. But they know it's a little bump because she could dominate. She's quick. She's fast. She's an Olympic sprinter with a racket. Great serve. I think her wide serve is right there up getting near Serena. I don't say that a lot because Serena had the best serve of all time. And she's a great competitor. And I like her backbone better than her backhand, even though her backhand's money in the bank. Depends on which bank you got it in, I guess, these days. But no. So it's a technical thing. But you know as well as I do, if you have confidence, you can camouflage a little bump, whether it be on your serve or whatever. And once she got confidence, it wasn't as magnified, the forehand, but it's still a little complicated. It's not, you know, crystal clean, and, you know, it's not locked in. So if they ever want to do something, I'm sure they'll reach out. But right now, listen, what she did this summer and got the confidence, you know, Brad Gilbert obviously did an amazing job. But at the end of the day, like me and you, everybody can get better. And I just think there's a little technical issue there. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, because if her forehand was rock solid, I mean, I could see a bucket full of Grand Slams, and I mean double figures for this young lady. But that's a little bit of an issue because you got to have great ground strokes on a regular basis, point after point on the women's tour.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. You're 100% right about the confidence thing too. And I mean, I think everyone knew, you know, when Coco stepped on the court against Serena Sabalenka, she was not probably the better hitter, right? She was probably not the better ball striker, the more powerful player, but she had the stronger mental fortitude in that match that got her through. And that's, as you said, it helped her improve her forehand. So you still feel like she could use reconstructive surgery though, because there was a little like it improved during the US Open, and then obviously she won a Grand Slam. So I mean, it can't get much better than that. But it, you know, where in your opinion there's still a little bit of work to do, you think?
Absolutely. No, nothing. Listen, she's holding onto the racket a little longer. Remember, her arms are a little longer. She's a great athlete. She's wiry, you know. So it's a complicated thing because you're so athletic. And there's a lot of moving parts, you know, that happen. She's not biomechanically connected from the ground up. But when you're confident, you move forward a little bit, you know, even if she hits a bad shot, she has enough makeup speed that she can save the day, you know, or she can still hang in there. Or maybe someone with not that foot speed is not going to get away with that. But that's a tough way to dominate. And I told her dad, listen, if the forehand was technically more sound, she could dominate because she has all the other boxes checked. The problem is you got to take time off. And what I would do is I would show her the ATP forehand. It'd be a very different stroke. But listen, you're talking 12 years of muscle memory baked in extra crispy from when she started playing. It's not easy. Okay, it's not easy. You know, if you have a speed bump on your slice or your volley or other parts, that's something different. But the three big ticket items, forehand, backhand, and serve, if there's a bump, it always bubbles up under pressure. And you've seen that with a lot of girls' second serves, it can just go into outer space once they feel nervous. When you're confident, you can camouflage anything.
No, it's very true. Now I want to ask you a question, because there's not like a lot of reporting that goes on in just the minutia of a tennis season. When someone misses a couple tournaments, you just assume they might be injured, or I mean, sometimes it's obvious because they get injured and then they miss a couple months. But is it like, do players take time off to do stuff like you just said, to try to work on a certain aspect of their game that's not working? I mean, do players on losing streaks just say, you know what, I have to just take 3 months off and just work on my game? Are they allowed to do that in this course of a schedule? Like, is that something that happens somewhat regularly with players? They'll just be like, yeah, I just need to take 3 months and improve my forehands.
Well, it cuts both ways. I think at the end of the year, there's an off season, a little bit, but unless you qualify for the ATP finals or for the women's stuff. So you have to take time off, but that's part of it. And you can say, I'm going to work on more fitness, or I'm going to work on something, but who are you going to work on it with? That's the wild card. You got to bring in a biomechanist, because a lot of the flaws, you got to understand, a lot of these players, especially more on the women's side, they've done stuff since age 6, and maybe the mechanics aren't where they could be. And a lot of people don't want to change because they've done it for so long. And like you said, if you're having some success and you're making a great living, or you win tournaments or whatever, you don't really want to change things. But in her situation, there is a little wobble there, okay, where you might not see that in Iga or this, or Sabalenka, or some of the players like when I had Capriati. You're not gonna. I don't see that. There's just a little wobble there, but she's so fast, she camouflages it. So to answer your question, people they take time off and they tweak things, but who are you tweaking it with? You almost have to have a background in biomechanics to explain what's going on, because the human eye can't see this stuff. And you got to see it at 400 or 500 frames a second. And it's a very complicated thing. I think everybody works on their weaknesses, but to change something dramatically, very seldom do they do it. Now, that being said, the serve is the easiest to change because there's no movement. And you saw that in Sinner. His serve has changed the last couple of years, where it was kind of like disjointed. And now it's actually a weapon. So a lot of players, the serve's the easiest because there's no movement. The ground strokes, and when you start getting into grip changes or back swings or elbow position, that's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, boy, that center serve. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Before we move on here, I wanted to ask, because you mentioned Iga and you mentioned radical changes. It seemed like there was a big disagreement between her and the rest of the tour on switching to the ATP balls, to having the normal balls. I'm curious your opinion on that, because it feels like a very controversial topic, where some of the biggest power hitters are saying, yeah, sure, bring it on. I think that's better for me. And then there's other players. We saw a lot of complaints at the US Open, a lot of like, hey, my elbow hurts. Like it's injuring my elbow right now because these balls are a lot heavier. And I'm curious what you thought about the WTA's decision to go with the same ball for both tours. And, I don't know, I mean, do you feel like it was just a matter of, hey, our number one player wants it, we should I guess we'll just listen to her?
Probably, because I think she has a strong voice, but I agree with the ball thing, because when you got the players starting to complain about shoulder, elbow, and wrist, that's not good. It's not good. You need continuity. But then again, the tours are in the business, they have sponsors, there's money involved. So it's very complicated. But if people are feeling that, I mean, you think about it, you shouldn't be complaining about the ball. You know what I mean? But they are. And if they feel there's injury, now here's the problem with that. Then once it gets into your head, you're already going into the match or into training, I don't like the ball. So you need an attitude adjustment about the ball. It is what it is. It's the same for the other person. You got to love the ball. You can voice your opinion, but if that's the ball they're using, you got to love it. But if you got that in your head, there'll be a breaking point and you'll bail out just because of the ball, or maybe you won't accelerate as much. But if people are getting injured, they need to address that. That's a big problem.
Yeah, and then obviously you mentioned, there's no continuity. That's the ball is a big discussion on the ATP tour as well. Do you feel like is it a possible that they could just say, hey, like let's just have the same ball and we'll just stencil on a different logo every time, like to keep, or are the providers going to be that upset about that, where no, we want Slazenger, Dunlop, they all want their balls. Is there a perfect solution for the men's or women's tour with the ball issues?
I think there is, because at the end of the day, money talks. And I think that will happen eventually. But right now, everybody's jockeying for position. But the interesting thing, this could be a big win for the tours, because the bidding could go up if they do decide just we're going to use this ball. You know, and again, but then again, maybe if there's multiple balls, they get multiple streams of income from different directions. So I don't know that much, because that's more out of my wheelhouse. But at the end of the day, they got to figure it out and stick with one ball, because you can't be going week to week. And especially when people are starting to complain about injuries, that's just not good for the sport.
Yeah, it's crazy. You'll be like, oh, why all of a sudden, why is this guy not playing well? Oh, because they switched away from his favorite ball. It's nuts how tennis can work like that. Before we move on to talking about some more wonderful tennis players, you got to a quick recap of all the best moments so far. You check out the clips below in the feed. We appreciate you being here on the ES Fancast. Kenny Ducey and Rick Macci, just talking some tennis. So let's talk about Rafael Nadal's comeback, which the people behind the scenes seem to think you predicted. I honestly did not think we would ever see Rafa come back, maybe once for the Olympics, but he's going to try to play a full season. We're going to see him in Australia. Given, we talked about the big beefy serve from the little man, Jannik Sinner, and then Carlos Alcaraz has obviously played lights out tennis for the last couple of years, even though he did kind of slow down in the last couple of months. The competition here for a Grand Slam is going to be pretty tough for Rafael Nadal. Can he win at least at Roland Garros this year? Can he win a Grand Slam?
Well, I think the number one thing is going to be his health. How does he feel like when he gets on the court? That's number one. And then you start playing, 3 out of 5 sets, and then you got to tee it up again a day later or 2 days later, and you're not used to that. I think he needs a lot of matches. The one thing that he has going for him is his name is Nadal. Okay. He's going to be a tough out for anybody. I think it's going to be much tougher because he's not going to be seeded. He could have, he could play Djokovic first round. Wouldn't that be crazy? But no, listen, because he doesn't have, he's not going to be seeded. So I think it's going to be tough for Rafa. But at the end of the day, I think it depends on his health. He needs to get a lot of matches in. He still has the pedigree. He has all the slams in his back pocket. You can't buy that over the internet. You can't buy that anywhere. So he has that championship quality. Now, can he win a slam? It's going to be tough. Anything's possible, but I think we got to wait and see how the beginning of the year plays out. Obviously, he's going to be more effective on clay, 112-3 at Roland Garros. Give me a break. That's crazy. I think if you're 112-3 in anything, ping pong, tiddlywinks, whatever that's crazy, let alone the best player in the world, So I think his best shot would be clay, but I think that's way down the road. I think it's his health, playing a lot of matches. But I love the guy because he wants to give everybody kind of a farewell, and everybody loves Nadal because he's the Spanish bull. He's a great role model. He's locked, loaded, and ready to launch every time he plays. It's 100%. I tell all the kids, just watch that guy. Watch how he acts, his demeanor. So he's great for the sport. And it really depends on his health and how many matches he can get in. But people know when they play him, he's not going to mail it in.
No, you're right. You look at the last Grand Slam he won at the Australian Open, or that wasn't the last one, but that specific slam, he had heat stroke, right, and he still won. He was down 2 sets and a break, I believe, or break points to Daniil Medvedev. Even last year when he had to hang up the shoes for the season, still Jack Draper wasn't able to beat him, even though he was clearly not 100%. So there's something about his name, just so hard to beat him. But speaking of him, and I know you talk about obviously Djokovic, those guys are playing late into their 30s. We didn't see Pete Sampras compete late into his 30s, and I'm curious, do you feel like he didn't think his record would ever be touched? Do you feel like he was just like, I've won a lot of Grand Slams. I've made my mark on the game. I'm just going to go retire and have some fun, which, I mean, all the power to him. He has a lot of money and a lot of Grand Slams in the bank. But do you feel like had he had a crystal ball and known that the 24 slams be the current record in 2020 going into 2024, do you feel like he would have been like, yeah, I'll give it a couple more years?
I don't think so. And here's why. Even one of my all-time favorite students, Andy Roddick, when I had him, he was #1 in the nation as a 12-year-old. Everybody has their timetable. And I feel some players, if they don't feel they can be competitive. Now, what I mean by that, they just don't want to be, a good win for someone. When you got guys like Sampras and guys like that, they don't want to start losing to people 30, 40, 50, 60 in the world, or if they don't feel they're competitive, or they don't want to every day put in the grind. People have no idea. They have no idea what these guys do off the court when you turn on your TV set and see them. It's brutal the way these guys train and the work they put in. And sometimes you lose the motivation, you lose the desire. But I think more importantly, if you can't be a serious threat, a lot of these guys say, I don't want to do it anymore. And you've seen that with Ash Barty. You've seen it with other players that they leave earlier than what we think. But then you got this Djokovic guy, the Serbian sniper, who's out there, at this age, still, taking scalp from everybody. It's unbelievable that he's still #1, 3 out of 4 Grand Slams. So to answer your question about Pete, he didn't even think about, that record wouldn't be touched. They don't think like that whatsoever. You know what I mean? And if he would have kept playing, you can see you lose a little half a step, or you're not as authoritative, or you just don't want to put in the work. So that's everybody's choice. And then to flip it around, you got someone like Venus who's still playing, and she just loves to play, loves to compete. And even though she's not going to win a slam, it's must-see TV because everybody loves VW.
How many more years do you think Venus has left in the tank? Is this the last one, or maybe we get multiple?
Well, I think it's up to Venus, but listen, she could still be a threat in doubles or mixed doubles if she wanted to play. She's only covering half the court. She can still serve, and she has that Bullock Compton return. So it's really up to her. But then again, last year on grass, she beat 14 in the world at age 42 or whatever, because grass, that's where she won 5 Wimbledons. And what's crazy, I have it right here in my office. I told Angela Buxton from England when they did a story, and Venus was 12. People don't know this. We used to practice 2 hours a day on grass to shorten her backswing, take the ball early. A good volley would be great. A bad volley, good. I said, this little girl someday is going to win 5 Wimbledons. It's right here in my office, and it's crazy. She won 5 Wimbledons, because it was suiting her game, quicker points, kind of like Kyrgios. It's not as much mental. Yep. But that's why she dropped that girl who's 14 in the world. So I think it's going to be tough. And it was a bad look at the Open because the girl wasn't supposed to be that good, and Venus' footwork was a little off. I think Venus will keep playing, but she should retire when she wants to. It's no one's really concern because it's her career, and most of all, she has nothing to prove.
That's true. Well, yeah, actually, we should get more into the Williams sisters, but just before we do, because you did mention Andy Roddick, and that was my favorite player growing up. That was the guy that kept me glued to the television set. And in my older age, I'm really not that old. I shouldn't say that. But as I've gotten older, I've started to really love and appreciate Roger Federer. I appreciated him out the door the last few years of his career. For me, even though Djokovic is the greatest, obviously, like for me, the player I liked watching the most, I eventually relented and admitted that. But when I was younger, I was infuriated that he would always beat Andy Roddick in any Grand Slam final that they ever played, and the head-to-head was insane. If specifically Roger Federer, you can keep Nadal and young Djokovic in the equation. If specifically Roger Federer never played tennis, a tough thing to ever think about, honestly, because I don't want that world to exist. How many Grand Slams do you feel like Andy Roddick would have won? And do you have maybe a specific generation that you would just, if you could place Andy Roddick anywhere, his career anywhere, that you would think he would be fitting perfectly and have a lot of success and maybe win some more US Opens?
Well, absolutely. Because listen, he not only had one of the biggest serves back then, he had the highest percentage. It's one thing to hit it hard. It's another thing to get it in. People don't realize how good his serve was. They look at it like it looked herky-jerky and funky, the take back. But at the end of the day, biomechanically, from the ground up, he was flawless. Where the leg drive initiated the racket, and it was amazing. And he was a Texas guy, a cowboy, a gunslinger. He loved to hit it hard, and his forehand was nuclear. So he had two, and he was a brutal competitor. Even as a little pipsqueak, he was like a mosquito. He was always bothering me. Can I play the guy? Can I play the guy? He was always, his thirst for competition. And any coach that's watching this will love that. That's what I love about Andy Roddick. Anybody, anytime, anywhere. So he had that box check, kind of like the Williams sister. He just loved competition so much. And when you feel that way, you're going to handle pressure better. Remember, Roddick had very few bad losses. He wasn't going to be Sampras or Agassi or something like that, but he was always in the top 10, and he never had a lot of bad losses. But you're right. If there's no, Federer, I think he has 5 or 6 Grand Slams for sure, just because of the firepower, because he's beaten, all those guys. But it's very difficult when you have to play these guys in the quarters. Then the next day, I got to play the next guy. And then you got Murray, Andy Murray's still in there. So there wasn't like a bunch of hamburgers or cheeseburgers in the draw. These guys had pedigree, and they've all won slams. So, no, listen, one of my all-time favorite, not just players, but people. He was such a great role model because he just loved to compete. And when we get through all the nonsense, and that's like what Coco has, you just got to be a brutal competitor. And that alone will make you the best you can be.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of interviewing Andy, I think last year before the U.S. Open. And I was like, well, why do you feel like, you were so popular, like, and the fans really connected with it? He said he thought he didn't look like he was very good at tennis, and he was just trying as hard as he could. And he was like, I feel like the hardworking blue collar people who come to watch me play really relate to me in a way, because I'm just giving it everything out there. I'm just hitting it as hard as, so I feel like that's sort of the style of tennis that he really did play. He was just so powerful, but he grinded, as you said. He was just a bulldog out there. Speaking of one of the players that maybe the ultimate competitor out there on the court, Serena Williams, she obviously, the US Open specifically, some great moments, some controversies there as well. I'm curious, what you thought of how things ended for her, if it was a little poetic, the way that she was able to win so many. I mean, I didn't even know if she was going to win one match in her last US Open. The fact that she was able to beat a top 5 player alone was crazy. But just given all the there were a lot of ups, there were some downs at the US Open. Like, just how crazy was it for her to end her run the way that she did a couple of years ago?
Well, I think first we got to back the truck up. Okay. Remember, from age 10 to 16, she played no tournaments. You might as well shut junior tennis down after that. Look, she played no junior tournaments, and she made her debut as a 16-year-old in Quebec, lost 1-1 to Annie Miller in the qualifying, and said, uh-oh, we're going to go back and train for 6 more months. I wasn't involved at that time. That was after me. And then the next year, she just shot through the rankings, and then at 17, I believe that's when she won the US Open. So remember, she's been out there since 17. And the reason why I bring that up, you're talking people that have retired 25, 28, and she's still out there, and she knocks out number 2 in the world at the US Open. And here's what's crazy. In my opinion, she could have had 30 Grand Slams if she, obviously she had a child, and she's had injuries, and she didn't play some of the Grand Slams. Okay. Hey, if her and BW would have played more doubles, okay, they were 14-0, 14-0. But you got to listen, you got to eat and sleep and go to the bathroom. You can't play singles and doubles. You can't do everything. That's how dominant they were. People don't appreciate it. And if they played mixed, it'd have been them and any partner, but they focus on the singles. So with Serena, the best women's athlete ever to hold a racket on the tour. But it didn't surprise me. But people got to understand the greatness. Not a lot of matches, a lot of inactivity, and still does that. Like Venus, nothing to prove, okay, and can step up her game. Because when she got confidence in that night match, she was taking, here's what I saw. She was taking a little earlier. She was rolling the dice. Confidence breeds confidence. It's a fleeting thing. You can't buy at Publix or Walgreens or over the internet. It's confidence is tricky. And when she got confident, she was putting on a show, and she had 23,000 people in Ash Stadium in her pocket. It was crazy that night.
It was,
okay.
The atmosphere was unbelievable. It was,
Yeah, I know. And that just shows you, people look at her as big, strong, fast, flexible, and they look at the wrong stuff. Listen, mentally, she was a pit bull. That's what Richard always used to call her. That's my little pit bull, and she was a brutal competitor, but she checked so many boxes. Clean ground strokes, the best serve ever, everybody agrees, but a brutal competitor. And that's why I took the chance. I saw these two little kids. There was a rage. There was a rage inside these two little kids. And when they'd run for a ball, their nose would be that far off the ground. The desire was like, it was like scary. That doesn't mean you're going to be great, but you have enough going for you if you get good coaching and the opportunity. So I know I kind of got away from your question, but she ended on her terms. I love it. It started at the U.S. Open. It ended at the U.S. Open. She has inspired not just the African-American community, but so many people around the world. But I really believe now with her platform and brand, the best is yet to come from Serena Williams.
Well, I can't wait to see what's next. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned the two controversies that she had, and honestly, like I was watching. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, because I was watching Nick Kyrgios's interview with Piers Morgan. Don't ask me why I was watching. It was very late at night. I needed some content to watch. I like watching tennis players interviewed, but he was trying to defend himself because they played the video of him smashing his rackets after he lost to Karen Khachanov. And I promise this question is about Serena Williams. I apologize. But he said that, hey, for the whole match, I was well behaved. I didn't throw my racket. I yelled a couple times when I didn't hit a good shot, but I think he broke 2 rackets the whole year. It said anyway, maybe 3, I'm not sure. But he was like, hey, look, 99% of the time I'm fine. It's just the one time you'll hear about it and then the media will make it crazy. And then Pierce was like, well, if I just all of a sudden decided to curse for 10 minutes or 10 seconds on my show, no one's going to care about the hours of the show. They're going to be like, hey, look at this guy cursing for 10 seconds. So that was an interesting trip into the mind of a tennis player. And I'm curious, Serena has had such a long career, right? And she's won so many Grand Slams. She's had so many amazing moments. Obviously, she is a competitor. She is outspoken, so she brings some of it on herself. But there are a lot of people that will focus on the negatives with her, right? And not the positives. And do you feel like that's unfair? And do you feel like that's a common theme with tennis players and as a whole, because it's such a sport where you're supposed to be buttoned up, and it's like all of a sudden, hey, there's some person doing something out of the ordinary in tennis that's going to make SportsCenter, that's going to make the news, and then that's their reputation now. Do you feel like it's unfair almost how, because maybe tennis is not a mainstream sport like the NFL, that maybe people aren't really aware of hey, this person's actually pretty well behaved and they're just a good competitor? Do you feel like they get an unfair rap a lot of times, tennis players like Serena, who just are sometimes magnets for controversy?
Yeah, first off, great question. But I think you're seeing the next gen and a lot of younger players. I mean, Shelton's hanging up the phone. You're seeing a lot more intensity, enthusiasm. There's more people like, Jimbo Connors back in the day. That's why people love that stuff. But it's a little trickier when it happens from a female. You know what I mean? Because Serena, okay, there, like I said, a rage. And, when she got called for the foot fault, and she went over to the linesman, or, just the way she is, the demonstrative attitude. But that was her competitiveness, and she would show it. Think about it. She's not trying to be something else. That is her. That's how these people feel inside. And if she tried to be somebody else, she might not be as competitive. See, and that works for her. I mean, maybe Venus was a little more subdued, but that's how Serena was. She was that way even as a kid. You know what I mean? She was always that way. But to me, any coach wants that. Now, if it hurts your game, like Roddick used to get mad, but he got more determined. Serena would get mad. It made him more determined. And, it makes people go to another level, and her scream would get louder. And if people don't like that, she's not out there to make buddies or friends, and she's not going out to dinner with them. She's there to compete and knock you out. And that's what I saw in these two little girls back then. They were all about the competition, plus many other people I've coached, obviously. So yeah, you're a lightning rod, and that's going to happen. And I understand Kyrgios's comment, but the media is going to respond. However, you could do 10 things great and one thing wrong. That's going to be blown up. But maybe that's what he had to do to be that competitive. So I understand where he's coming from, but you got to remember, when people start saying, who are the most 5 competitive female tennis players of all time, I think most people are going to go right to Serena. Not because she's the GOAT and she's won the most or whatever. All of them are competitive. This is a different level with Serena Williams.
Now, is there any before we move on from Serena, is there any insight you can give us into I don't know, any pre-match rituals she did? Any because obviously we witness all these, there's so many cameras behind the scenes now, but was there anything that she liked to eat before a match? I don't know, any sort of, for the Serena fans out there, anything they might not have known about her that maybe fueled her competitive spirit, or I don't know, a lot of her wins.
I think a lot of them obviously have the headsets on and they listen to music to pump them up or whatever. But no, there's just not like a, Mike Tyson type of attitude that's going on. No, I think most of them before the match, are calm and relaxed. They want to hear motivational music and stuff like that. So it's pretty common, other than how they warm up, on the bike and all that stuff. But no, there's nothing like that. Because remember, I had them from age 10 to 15. You're kind of talking the pro tour. So if there was, I'm not really privy to that, but I know that they just want to be calm or whatever. But when the bell rung, game on from the Compton Comet.
They are very zen, and then all of a sudden, boom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about something also that affects both tours. That's been a big topic of discussion this year. Honestly, this year more than most years. But someone that you trained, Maria Sharapova, she dealt with the doping ban. And then obviously the big story this year was Simona Halep. And there was a big debate about whether or not she really got a fair shake in the whole thing, and if it was really her fault. And then on the men's side, you had Michael Emer retire after his doping ban, and him and Jensen Brooksby, ironically, who one of the first times I ever saw Jensen Brooksby play, they played each other at the US Open. But they both were sort of saying, hey, this wasn't my fault. I missed the test, and the tester didn't come on the right time. And reading more into it, it seemed like there were other stories about players being like, yeah, the testers sometimes do that to mess with the players, or they come right at the end, or it seemed like a very, for lack of a better term, silly process, the testing. But I mean, I don't know, I'm curious what you felt about the Simona Halep situation, to the extent that you're comfortable answering that question. And then, also just in general, do you have any idea as to how that process works? Because it seems like the players, even the ones that don't test positive, seem to have an issue with how all the testing is going on in tennis.
Yeah, well, first off, I don't have any insight, but just looking from the outside of the whole thing, it needs to be structured better. Shouldn't be one of those gotcha type things. The players what's going on, but none of the players are going to say, yeah, I was doing it. No, I never heard anybody say, yeah, I'm busted. Here's video evidence of me doing something. So it's such a gray area, and you see that in football, basketball. You see it in all sports. Unfortunately, there's a lot of common threads with medication and subtle things, even vitamins that could affect this. So I don't know that much about it, but I think they got to get it more streamlined where everybody knows what's going on and the playing field is level. But then again, if someone's doing something illegal, they should know there's a possibility that if they get tested, then there are going to be repercussions. So it cuts both ways, but I think there has to be something with more discipline and structure instead of just a sneak attack, from around the corner.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that it affected someone here in the United States, but time to get to your favorite part of the interview. I'm sure I would say 100% of every interview you've done, someone asks you, hey, what's going on with American tennis? When's a man going to win a Grand Slam? So I want to ask you a question about that, because
like I'm obviously a fan of the game. I especially on the HSBC Tour side, I've followed for the last 5 years, and I couldn't be more proud of this country's tennis players right now. We have, I think, 4 players inside the top 25 or 5 inside the top 25, a top 10 player in Taylor Fritz. And, I'm curious, do you feel like it's got to be hell for those players when they are working their tail off, they make the top 10, which is an incredible achievement. I mean, you look at, someone from, if Radu Albat from Moldova were to make the top 10, they would throw a parade for him. They'd be like, oh my gosh, we have a top 10 tennis player. It's only because of all the greats in America that have come before these guys that the expectation is that we need a number 1 in this country. Do you feel like it's tough for especially some of those, the players who now maybe they've hit their peak? Like, it seems like, I don't know if Taylor Fritz is ever going to win a Grand Slam. If his peak is a top 10 tennis player, that's very good. Do you feel like it's tough for those guys mentally to just know that, like, the expectation is, if I don't win the US Open, if I'm not number 1, no one's going to care about me, or even maybe men's tennis in America? Like, is that a lot of pressure on them?
I don't think so. I look at this very differently. Okay, number 1, we have more people playing tennis, and there should be that many players in the top 10 or top 20 or top 50. It's like we've moved the bar back. Like, we have this many players in the top 100. It's like, okay, let's just keep moving the goalpost back.
All right, so I'm a little soft. You're right. I agree. I thank you for toughening me up, Rick. And let's toughen up these American men.
So we should have that many players. Now, are they thinking no one's done it since Roddick? I'm sure they've talked about it, but listen, now's the time, because you got, Djokovic isn't going to be around forever. Okay. Even though he doesn't look like he's going anywhere for a while. Okay. You got Fed out the door, Rafa, he's going to probably retire after this year. You got Murray. So it's wide open. You're going to get to round of 16 or the quarters, and you might not have to face someone who's won a Grand Slam or doesn't have that pedigree. That you feel like, I can win, I expect to win instead of hope to win. So that's different. And you've already seen that with some guys get to the quarters and semis. Now, that being said, of all the Americans, I went on the record, I think Korda is the one to win 2 or 3. I love his game. It's very different. He can bring you in. He can volley. I like his forehand, even though it's like a weapon. It could be a liability because maybe not as much spin at time. But I like Korda because he can mess you up. It's kind of like a hybrid with Federer in a lot of ways. So he's the one, if he can stay injury-free. And once again, I love the pedigree. The mom and dad played on the tour. They've been there, done that. So that's a good, sounding board for him. So that being said, all the Americans, whether it be Shelton or Fritz or Tiafoe or Tommy Paul or Riley Opelka, all these guys, they're always going to be in there because there's now a vacuum and they feed off of each other. And I think there'll be more Americans. But now you got to remember, everybody else is getting better too. Medvedev, the human contortionist, he's not going anywhere. Rune's going to be in there a little bit. Sinner, the champion downhill skier at age 12, that guy's not going anywhere. And you already know how I feel about Alcaraz. Something the world's never seen. He's a generational talent. Barring injury, he's going to have a bucket of Grand Slams. I see double-figure Grand Slams from this guy. Turbo speed like no other. So everybody's getting better. And it's like I tell the kids every day here, if you're not getting better, you got worse. Okay? So it's going to get tougher, even though Federer's out the door and Nadal's kind of just coming back. But I don't think that the players from America feel like that's a pressure on them. And I think they look as an opportunity because the draw looks juicier than it did a while back. And they're also looking at their buddies. If they can do it, in the top 20, so can we. And that's why you see Shelton's kind of got in there now, and they all feed off of each other. So it's great for American tennis that we got this quality. Any of them could break through, as well as I do. Djokovic gets hurt, or he retires, or whatever. Or Alcaraz, any of these guys retire, the whole landscape changes, and you can grab one like Dominique Thiem.
Well, to those of you watching this, we have interactive polls in the feed. We have infographics. Please keep interacting. Rick Macy's here. Incredible insight on the game of tennis. We're coming down the home stretch here, and I do want to keep talking about American tennis because that's really all I'm here for. And I love that you said Riley Opelka because everyone forgets he exists and he's coming back next year. But before we do that, I want to ask you because we mentioned both guys. The last couple months, I'll be honest, I was a big Alcaraz is better than everybody in this generation guy. I was a big, I don't think Jannik Sinner will ever do it at a Grand Slam guy. And I'm starting to feel like Sinner might have a better career than Alcaraz when it's all said and done. I'm curious right now, who do you think Novak Djokovic would say would be better? And who does Rick Macy say is better right now?
Who's going to have a better career? I hope both of us are still here 10 years from now. We can have this discussion because we won't know who's going to have a better career for a while. Okay. I think Djokovic would say Carlos because he has elements of himself, Federer, Nadal, and maybe a little bit of Agassi. I think there's all kinds of elements, and the Jokers went on record and even said that. Okay. So
Sinner's beaten them twice. That's the funny part about it.
Yeah, but listen, we all know how that can go. But look at Nadal and Federer and Djokovic and their head-to-head record. This thing's going to change a little bit. I'm just looking at who's checked the most boxes, and Sinner and Alcaraz are going to play in many Grand Slam finals. I think they're a cut above the others. No one's going undefeated. The last time I looked, okay, no one's going to go undefeated. You're going to lose. You got to fail to succeed. Okay, what I saw from Alcaraz at the end, little injured. He was more on the back foot. And now remember, people got to understand, and I'm not making excuses. Indoors, some guys are serving 80% first serve. I mean, one match, Dimitrov served 88%. Give me a break. That ain't going to happen outdoors. It ain't going to happen.
So that's just Zverev.
That changes the landscape. And listen, it's a fine line. And remember, he's 20 years old. He's the youngest of all of them. That doesn't mean he's going to be better. I'm just saying that he's a cut above because he checks more boxes. There's no real flaws. The only flaw is he has more items on the menu to order because he can do so many different things, where other people are just like amazing vanilla with a little sprinkle in there. Alcaraz can do so many things. And once that complicated, it becomes trickier. Djokovic would say, if he had the answer, in my opinion, Alcaraz would, but Sinner's going to win his fair share. And I think both of them are going to be great. I think you're going to be talking about these guys like Nadal, Federer, and Joker, 10 years from now, barring injury, because that can change everything. But in my opinion, Alcaraz is a leader in the clubhouse. I think the best is yet to come. And people shouldn't overreact, even though they might think a lot of people overreacted by how good he was going to be. But no one's going undefeated. This is men's tennis.
Yeah.
You hit the serve. Listen, you hit the serve 140 in the corner, you could be in a tiebreaker. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Isner beat Federer on clay and Davis Cup. I mean, so anybody can beat anybody, but Alcaraz is special, and I believe in this guy. I've never seen anything like this, but he's not going undefeated.
Well, hey, I mean, the other thing going for Alcaraz that he's won 2 Grand Slams and Sinner hasn't yet to win one. So that's he definitely is the leader in the clubhouse. And as much as Sinner's done well in best of 3 and in late season matches, we haven't seen it in the Grand Slam. So we'll see what happens. But one guy that did do it in a Grand Slam out of nowhere was Ben Shelton. He got to the semifinals against Novak Djokovic. We touched on him earlier, but I want to ask 2 questions about him that I've always been curious about. One, I know you're a big forehand guy, but how did he get so much better on return at the US Open? Because this guy, I don't know how much you watched him in the Challengers or during the whole season when he had a kind of a bad season. He was a serve bot. He was painting the lines and just wowing everyone with his serves, but his return of serve was real bad. And then he gets to the US Open, and I think everyone was blown away by just how he improved in like a week and a half in that regard, and just actually became a player that could win matches. And then he won Tokyo weeks later. Is that uncommon to see a player with a big weakness like that just unlock something? I mean, he credited his new strings. He thought maybe the new strings with at least his forehand were helping him. I mean, and I'm curious, how you felt that happened. Like, how did he make the semifinals of the US Open and just improve it so quickly?
Well, if he thinks it's the strings, then that definitely help if he thinks it, okay? Just like the tennis ball. If you don't like the ball, it doesn't like you either. So, but the biggest thing is the big C. It's confidence. But he did modify. Now, back to truck up a little bit here. 3 years ago, he played the Battle of Boca. We have a $10,000 prize money tournament here every weekend. This weekend, we have over 200 players. He lost in the second round. Not that I'm saying the Battle of Boca is, tougher than the U.S. Open, but 3 years ago when he was at Florida, you know what I mean? Even when he played here, I saw a huge serve, great forehand, but he had a bubble loop. What I mean, on the backhand, he pretty much had a bubble loop. He's actually changed his backhand where it's kind of straight back, kind of locks and fires. And I think that's really helped his return. And he's now thinking, let's just get balls back. Okay. Even he's chipping some forehands.
Yeah,
he's
the
not
curious
ripping
method.
Negate, live another day, make the guy play. So I think his mindset has changed. And when you have confidence, you move a little quicker, you hit it more in front, you're more alert, you read it. It's an intangible thing in all sports. Okay, so I think that's kind of what's happened. But that being said, with his serve, okay, if he's hitting spots, he's going to be right there 5-all, 6-all with anybody in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly talented, and he is, and he did almost have a moment against Novak Djokovic in that semifinal in the third set. He obviously lost in straights, but broke him serving for the match, and there was a lot made of his attitude, and as much as I've had so much fun watching him, there are people who have not loved his overly confident attitude, and I was shocked sitting in the press conference after his quarterfinal win against Tiafoe, and he was, he wasn't saying anything derogatory about Novak, but he was like, oh, another tough opponent, a guy that's won a lot of these. He just seemed to be like, yeah, I think I can beat him, and I took that as, we need more of that. We need more players who are like, yeah, I think I can beat Novak Djokovic, because you're not going to beat him if you don't believe it, right? So I took that as, hey, this kid has the confidence needed to win Grand Slams. Other people took it as, this kid doesn't have any respect. And then you also see his, you'll see his college highlights. That's just college tennis, the screaming, the let's go, So I'm curious, do you feel like this is good for him? And just, do you agree with me that it's just a confident kid? And what would you say to the people that don't love the way Ben Shelton carries himself on and off the court?
Well, first off, if you think you can't, you won't. I mean, what's he going to do? If you want Djokovic's autograph, you can do that anytime. No, listen, you got to think you can. Okay, even if you can't, you have to believe it. But that's how he's wired. His dad played on the tour. He's a feisty guy. He's kind of like Roddick. In that regard, he's a great competitor. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. That's what makes him tick. Now, if people don't like that, I get it, but that's that next gen. They're more showmen. And when you're all about the competition and you are like that, you actually handle pressure better. You're not wired so tight. You're just having fun. And he's out there just having a blast. And I think that's a wild card people don't understand. It keeps him calm. Now, people are going to think, oh, you're not respectful or whatever. Listen, you're not going to dinner. You're out there trying to be the winner. I don't get it. That mindset, it's brutal. Then the next day, everybody's going to forget. Anyways, at the end of the match, people always respect. You respect, but you don't fear. So I love his attitude. He's a pit bull. He's a grinder. He's great for American tennis because he's all about the competition. But I love his attitude. And if people... it's not disrespectful. You know what I'm saying? You're a competitor, and people from the outside, they cannot relate to a high-level athlete like that in any sport, how they feel. And you see that in other sports also. I mean, guys that they're just so about the competition, they're not out there trying to make friends.
Yeah, and they're just trying to win. And so before we need to get to, we only have a few minutes left here. I want to just ask a quick question that everyone, I needed to ask you. Pickleball. Yes or no? I mean, it seems like there's a big war on pickleball with the tennis people. Some people aren't bothered. Some people are bothered. What side of the fence are you on?
I'm not, if people want to play, I think it's great exercise. It's good for people. if you love something, I think you should do it. I think it's good from a health perspective. People that don't like it, I mean, that's their opinion, but I think it's great because tennis is maybe a little more complicated and people can just not move as much and they can get exercise. So I think anything that's good for your mind and body is like a positive thing. I don't think it's ever going to compete. Obviously, with tennis, it's going to take a while. And there will be people in tennis, as you've already seen, go over because they got the hands and they've already kind of been down the yellow brick road and they know kind of how to do that and everything. Some people don't like the sound of the ball hitting. That annoys a lot of people, but it's here to stay. And I think it's great from a health perspective.
All right, and yeah, we'll go rapid fire to end this one. Just some quick hits. First of all, we mentioned we were talking about American men. You can name Cooper Williams, Leonard T, and whoever you want. What are the guys right now playing tennis in America, the men, that you think will eventually win a Grand Slam?
Sebastian Korda. I think he's a cut above. He's been injured. I like his game. His backhand's one of the best in the world. Okay, his serve's only going to get better. Okay, I like his forehand. It's a weapon. Sometimes it can be a little liability, but it's good enough. Okay, and he can bring you in, and he can volley short on purpose. A lot of guys volley short accidentally, or a lot of people, especially club players. Novak, the Serbian sniper, he's separated himself just by what he's done this year and the year before. And listen, the numbers don't lie, but I don't even go off of that with a lot of things. I do the eyeball test, even though I know what you said about Federer. He's poetry in motion. He plays the whole mass. Look like he's not sweating. The guy's just so graceful and elegant, and just what an amazing talent. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. The Joker is the GOAT. He's the best of all time. And in my opinion, it's not even close. Serena Williams, once again, the numbers, but more importantly, the numbers could have been greater. But I was there and I know how she's wired. And this is an athlete that we've never seen. She's big, strong, fast, quick, and she could do the splits. And she had pretty high level technique and the best serve ever. But the wild card, just like VW, her sister, at Compton rage. There was a rage inside of her. So those are the two best players of all time. And in my opinion, now it's not even close.
Yeah, no. And to your first point, I think the Fed fans are in denial right now. I think you just got to admit at this point.
Let me add one more thing. Who beat Serena more than anybody was Venus. She beat her 12 times. No one could even come close to saying that. And Serena's played a long time. It was 19 and 12, So at the end of the day, Venus was amazing. And she kind of gets lost in the shuffle. People have no idea how good Venus Williams was. She transcended the sport. She brought an athlete, tall, long, graceful. Now you see a lot of that athleticism on the tour. And that's another thing. In 1991, not only did I think they could be number one, once I saw that, I think you got the next Michael Jordan. No brother, man. I got the next two. That line's in the movie. I thought they could transcend the sport. And they did, especially Venus.
Well, that was my next rapid fire question here. Did you have more fun watching them play against each other or play doubles together?
Play doubles together, because when they played each other, they wouldn't go for the jugular. They tried, but that's why there was a lot of blowback. The matches are fixed. It looked like they were battling, but they were kind of hitting Compton cupcakes sometimes. They weren't hitting missiles, So listen, it's hard. And she's looking over there. It's not Hingis, or it's not Capriati, or it's not Sharapova. When Serena played Sharapova, it was a cat fight, because there was a lot of layers to that rivalry. Okay, so no, the intensity wasn't there. I think they both tried 100%, but maybe you wouldn't go to the jugular because not only are you gonna, like, you're playing your sister, you're gonna go home and probably eat dinner with them. It's a whole different dynamic. So I love when they play doubles, because it was like a Compton street fight, no matter who they played. And they didn't even play doubles the right way. They just hit the ball at you and came to the net. It was just like lights out. They just were so aggressive. It was must-see TV.
That's why Davis Cup is so fun sometimes. You see these singles guys who just never play doubles, and they're like, well, this guy He's just playing it like a singles match, but he's crushing
Yeah.
the ball and hitting winners. All right. Favorite thing about Serena and thing about her that really grinded your gears as her coach.
Say that one more time. The what?
Favorite thing about Serena and the thing as her coach that really would grind your gears that she would do, if anything.
Well, first off, it was her competitiveness. It didn't matter. You know, if there was like a piece of chicken on the table, she'd push Venus out of the way to get it. She'd have to be first to get a drink. She was always like, had to be first. She was so competitive. I remember, I got to tell this story real quick. When she got in the sand pit with 40 other kids and we played tag, so you got to shake and bake and juke and weave and you work on agility. When Serena, it came time for her to play tag, she went up and tagged the person with a closed fist. I said, whoa, Serena. Now she was 11. I go, wait. You got to keep the fist open. But that was how she played tag. And when I told her that story at the after party, after the red carpet, she was like crying, laughing because she's a mother. She probably even forgot about that. But that was like epic. You know what? There's nothing. Well, the only thing when she was a kid, sometimes she wasn't as stick to it as Venus because Venus was more mature. And it's great for any coach. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. You know, sometimes Serena, I had to really motivate her because she was just kind of hanging out 10 and 11 like Venus's sister. But I always found a way to motivate her. And if I said, I'll get you something out of the snack machine, she started popping the popcorn with those feet, extra butter, and I could always get the most out of her. So it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But as a kid, she needed motivation because she was just kind of getting into it.
All right, and two more. I love that story. I think we've learned a lot about Serena today, which has been great. Jimmy Connors or John McEnroe? Who are you picking?
In a match?
Yeah, if they played each other in their prime.
It depends on the surface. You know what I mean? Because, you know, McEnroe had the hands and he served and volleyed. You know, you probably got to go with McEnroe because he was
certainly not going to talk about clay for sure. It's either grass or hard court with these.
Yeah, no, you probably have to go with McEnroe, even though I love Connors, just because like the blue collar and he's a grinder. You know, even back in the day, we had the same haircut. I used the T2000 myself, so I love Connors. But you have to go with McEnroe just because the matchup was so unique. But McEnroe could like kind of expose Jimbo in certain areas where maybe a baseliner couldn't. So I'd probably go with McEnroe.
All right, then finally, as a fan of the game, next year, women's tour or WTA tour or ATP tour, surprise Grand Slam winner in a board prediction.
Okay, I say the women, Carolina Mahova. I love her game. Okay. The Czech, you know, I love her game. Technically, the best volleys out there. She's adventurous. If she doesn't get injured, you know, that's a wild card. It can change everything.
She was also injured when she played Coco too at the U.S. Open, and she almost turned that match. Yeah, she can make you uncomfortable. That would be my surprise. I think that she could go in there, and I'm going to go back to what we talked about. I say Sebastian Korda. I think good things. I would say around the corner, but I'll say around the Korda. Okay, for him. So he's the one. Before we wrap, I know we got to wrap. I want to talk about the book. $1 Billion Mind with me and Dr. Niva, you know, Harvard educated. You want to hear an amazing story? I taught her and her sister. They went to Harvard and she reached out. We collaborated on a book. This is so inspiring, so motivating. And it's a playbook. You don't have to, it's not about tennis. Okay. There's some anecdotes about tennis. It can help you in the game of life because I'm probably as much a life coach as a tennis coach, as you probably kind of figured out already. And this is like a gold nugget like no other. And she's a genius. She's one of the best in the world. And we teamed up, and it's very, very unique because she comes from the medical point of view. I come just from the way I look at this motivating and what I've done with people throughout my career. It's available on Amazon.com. People are going to be blown away because it's for anybody, any age, business, sports, anything. And you'll be so inspired. Whatever you do the next day, you'll do it better. What was the one thing about the human minds that you didn't know before you went into this business venture and wrote this book? It's very complex, you know, and people, you know, they don't realize they have control over their mind. They let other things control them.
and you got to control the situation and not let it control you. I've always been wired that way ever since a kid, but it's even more clear how complex it is and so many things, how you're wired and so on. But people are gonna be blown away by the book, and it's the first of many we're gonna do stuff on. And I love Dr. Niva.
Well, we love you here at the ES Fancast, Rick. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know it's perfect hoodie weather out there in Florida, so you want to get back outside. I might be buying one of those hoodies pretty soon because I love all the tennis merch. But
No, you get
really,
you
really
your
great
address.
talking
No,
to you.
you give me your address, I'll send you one, so you don't have to buy one. Just give me your address.
You see, I'm a big promoter of tennis here in New York City. This is the Tim Van Leer Gallery Art and Tennis Club hat that I don't know. I love it. So, but we love you. And it was a great chat. We talked about a wide variety of things. Hopefully you at home watching learned a little bit from Rick. And, it's only a few weeks until tennis season again. So it's almost time to start thinking about the Australian Open. So Rick, we appreciate you being here. Have a great weekend and happy belated birthday once again. Congrats on another trip around the sun.
No, thank you. Enjoyed it. And we'll definitely do it again. Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see you later. Kenny Ducey signing off from the ES Fancast.